All right, buckle up, everyone, because this time on Deep Dive, we're taking a trip to the underworld.
Ooh.
And get this, we aren't just talking about one, we're diving into two entire underworlds.
Wow.
We've got excerpts from Hades versus Anubis, the dark truths of the gods of the dead.
Right.
And let me tell you, this source is way more than just your typical myths and monsters.
It really is, yeah. It's interesting because we often see Hades and Anubis, portrayed in this very black and white way.
Yeah.
Good versus evil, the whole shebang.
Right.
But this source, it really digs deeper, It suggests that their powers, the domains they rule over, those aren't just about good and evil, but they actually reflect completely different ways that these cultures thought about death.
Interesting. So it's less about a cosmic battle of good versus evil and more about just two totally different perspectives.
Exactly.
Huh. It's kind of like when, you hear about a person and they got a certain reputation,
right?
But then you actually meet them and you're like, wait, you're nothing like what I expected.
Yeah, totally.
Except in this case, we're dealing with the guys in charge of the afterlife.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way to put it. And it's not even really a versus situation, It's not like a big cosmic boxing match. This deep dive, it's more about appreciating how nuanced these perspectives on the afterlife really are.
Okay.
And why those differences might have existed in the first place.
That's really interesting. One thing that I found really interesting from the excerpts that you shared is, this whole idea of souls showing up in the wrong afterlife.
Yeah.
It's almost like a big...
Like a bureaucratic?
Yes, like a big cosmic bureaucratic mix-up.
Exactly.
Why is that happening?
Well, the source seems to suggest that these misplaced souls, they're kind of a symptom of a much deeper conflict.
Okay.
One that's rooted in ideology, really. You see, Hades, he's the undisputed ruler of the Greek underworld.
Right.
And he represents order. He's all about finality.
Right.
He makes sure that the cycle of life and death keeps going, like a well-oiled chariot.
Right.
Think about it. Ancient Greece, they were all about structure. They loved their laws.
Yeah, totally.
And Hades brings that same energy to death.
Makes sense.
He is the order in that realm.
Fascinating. So if Hades is like the law, the unchangeable force, what about Anubis? Because in my notes, I'm seeing a lot about balance when it comes to Anubis.
You've hit on a really key difference there. Anubis, he's the one with those iconic scales.
Right.
And he embodies Ma'at.
Ma'at.
It's the Egyptian principle of balance, of harmony.
Okay.
He weighs the hearts of the dead against the feather of truth. And this isn't just about who gets punished and who gets rewarded.
Right.
It's about maintaining order in the universe, making sure everything stays balanced in the grand scheme of things.
Wow. Okay, so we got these two completely different ways of looking at the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking that's got to cause some friction, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you've got Hades and Anubis, coming face to face.
Oh, yeah. The source definitely doesn't shy away from that tension. Right.
It actually uses their confrontation to show just how big this difference in philosophy really is.
Wow.
There's this one part where Hades, and he's usually portrayed as this quiet, serious guy, right?
Right.
He actually raises his voice at Anubis.
No way, really?
What's it say?
It's not so much the exact words, but more the feeling behind it.
Okay.
He's basically saying that Anubis is messing up the natural order of things.
Oh, I see.
That he's trying to be in charge of souls that should really be under Hades' control,
Right. I mean, Hades is used to being the top dog in his realm, right?
Exactly.
After thousands of years, I guess anyone would get a little territorial if someone stepped on their turf.
Yeah, for sure.
But one thing that stood out to me was how the source talks about Hades being lonely. How does that loneliness play into this whole conflict with Anubis?
That's where the source really gets interesting. It connects Hades' need to be in control with this deep loneliness that comes with, being in charge of the underworld.
Right.
Think about it. He's outside of the world of the living, right?
Yeah.
His job is to keep things running in a place that everyone's afraid of.
That's going to take a toll. It makes you think about what power really costs.
Exactly.
Hades might rule the underworld, but he's also trapped there,
right,
cut off from everyone else.
Yeah. And that isolation, it affects how he deals with Anubis.
It's not just about the souls themselves, is it?
No, it's deeper than that.
It's about this burden he carries,
Yeah.
Being stuck in the land of the dead for, forever.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy stuff. It's fascinating how the author uses this conflict to explore what that kind of power does to you psychologically,
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about Hades and his need for order and how it comes from this really profound loneliness.
Yeah.
But what about Anubis?
Right.
The source mentions he's not just a divine judge. He's described as this calm, methodical presence, almost like a force of nature himself.
Well, Anubis, he's often shown with the head of a jackal, right?
Right.
And jackals, they're known for having really sharp senses and
Right.
for knowing their way around in the dark.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's a fitting symbol because Anubis is like a guide, a psychopomp.
A psychopomp.
Yeah, it's like a guide for souls. He helps them through the afterlife.
Oh, okay. And then there's that whole thing with the weighing of the heart.
Right.
It's such a powerful image, you know. What is it about that ritual that makes it so central to the Egyptian idea of balance?
The weighing of the heart, it represents that Egyptian belief in Ma.
Right.
But it's more than just deciding who's good and who's bad.
Okay.
It's about how complex our experiences are as humans.
Okay.
Think about it. Every choice you make, everything you do, even every thought you have,
Right.
it's all weighed carefully to figure out what happens to you in the afterlife.
It's not just about being a good or bad person. It's
Right.
like way more intense than that.
It's almost like this cosmic accounting in a way.
Exactly.
And Anubis, he's the one who makes sure it all happens the right way.
Right.
He's not there to punish or forgive you, really. He just makes sure those cosmic scales stay balanced.
Makes sense.
That the consequences, the effects of your actions, they all add up. It's about keeping the whole system working.
Wow. So we've got Hades, who represents order through law and structure,
Yes.
and then Anubis, who represents balance through this super personal and detailed accounting of your life, your soul.
You got it.
You've really hit on the main point of this whole source.
It's not about one of them being right and the other being wrong.
Right.
It's about seeing that both of these viewpoints on death and the afterlife, even though they're different, they're both valid. They come from different cultures, different ways of thinking.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Right.
So we've got Hades, all about order in his realm, and Anubis carefully keeping everything balanced. What happens when these totally different worldviews collide? Do they, like, have a showdown?
So no, it's interesting you say collide because it's less of a head-on collision and more of a, well, like they hit a wall together.
Okay.
The source makes it seem like when they actually confront each other, both of them kind of freeze up.
So instead of this epic battle, they both take a step back.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like Hades and Anubis, by going head-to-head, actually end up understanding their own roles even better.
Oh, interesting. So this conflict, it's more like a catalyst for growth.
Right. And remember, these are beings who have existed for, like, ever.
Right.
Their ideas about the universe, they've had ages to solidify.
Yeah, they probably think they've got it all figured out.
And then, bam, this encounter shakes everything up.
Wow, that's really powerful. This conflict forces them to rethink everything they thought they knew.
Absolutely. And it shows us that facing different perspectives, even when they seem like the total opposite of our own, even that can help us grow.
It does. It makes you realize that maybe we're too quick to judge people in our own lives just because they see things differently than we do, you know?
I agree.
Like maybe we have more in common with those different perspectives than we think.
It could be, yeah. You know, it's really interesting how the author uses Hades and Anubis
Right.
to look at not just mythology, but what it really means to understand someone else. That's a pretty deep idea.
It really is.
Oh,
Well, that's about all the time we have for our deep dive into Hades and Anubis.
fascinating stuff,
It's definitely a lot more complicated than just Hades versus Anubis.
for sure.
This source really challenges us to look deeper, beyond the surface, to see the bigger meaning behind these figures and what they represent, even for us today.
Yeah, even thousands of years later.
It's amazing. Thanks for joining me on this trip to the underworld, everyone. Until next time.